right, Bigger Pockets. We're trying to get our Instagram feed on here. It looks like it has frozen. That is not what we were aiming for. So let's see. There we are. I think this might do it. Give us 1 second here for technical difficulties and adjustments. All right. Seems like we are live on both feeds. Happy Friday afternoon, Bigger Pockets, Instagram and Facebook communities. Andrew Cushman here for another episode of Ask Andrew Anything. This is where you get to ask me any questions that you have in regards to rental properties and specifically multifamily and apartments and how to get into that business. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, Full Story is back on episode, I want to say 179 and 270. I used to be a chemical engineer, quit doing that in 2007 to go into flipping houses full-time in Southern California. And then in 2011, went and syndicated an apartment complex. So our first apartment deal was 92 units, mostly vacant in Macon, Georgia, on the other side of the country. Since then, we haven't looked back. We've done about 2,100 apartment units. Thank you for all the hearts there on Instagram. And that is our full-time business. So the goal of today is for me to be as much of a resource to you as I can be. So that means you bring your questions and ask me whatever you think is most relevant to help you get into the business or scale the business if you're already in. One couple of things. One, please let us know where you're coming in from. Love seeing from where people are joining from around the country and actually around the world. We've had people from, seems like almost every time we have someone from Saudi Arabia, but we've had Israel, we've had Germany, Norway, all those kind of places. So please let us know where you're coming in from. And also, as we're talking, hit the hearts, hit the likes, so that we know that what we're talking about is helpful to you. So hello, Kia from LA, not far from me at all. We've got Patek in New Jersey. Bahoved in New York City. Ooh, we got an Oahu, beautiful place. Greetings from Austin, Texas, East Side, Jose. I love Austin, fun town. Got Miami, Florida, Rebecca, and lots of people. San Francisco Bay Area, not far from here either. And E-Mobi Society, Vegas, baby. Hey, got someone else from SoCal. All right. Cool. Thanks everyone for jumping in. Appreciate it. Questions are coming in here as well. So let's pick one. Let's see. Man, Facebook is beating out Instagram for questions this time. So hello, Alex from Toronto. So all right, let's grab a question. I think I'm going to start on Facebook since we've got so many questions here. Randy Stewart on Facebook asks, how would you find sample legal documents for the creation and structuring of a syndication? That's an interesting question. And the reason being is most attorneys that create those and most sponsors that use them aren't going to just hand them out because they are rightfully so concerned that someone's just going to take that and then try to do their own and do a syndication. And number one, not pay the people who created it for their work, but number two, go do a syndication the wrong way with incorrect documents because they kind of edited it themselves, right? So. But that doesn't mean that you can't try to get one to look at so you can familiarize yourself with them. So how I would do that is I would connect with another sponsor, somebody else who's done a syndication, and just ask them, say, hey, can I see the document? Or even better, just sign up as a potential investor on several sponsors or syndicators lists. And when they do a deal, you will get their syndication documents. And then you can review those and use that to give yourself an idea of, okay, when you do yours, how you're going to structure that. So that's probably the most effective, is just sign up go out there. There's a whole bunch of sponsors that, if you listen to Bigger Pockets, you probably know their names. Go to their website, sign up to be on their list, and you'll get their documents when they come out. So good question. All right, over to Instagram, Helping Hands Carpentry. I like your handle. That's a good name. I'd love to know more about that. But if I'm buying an apartment building with inherited tenants and smoking was previously allowed, do I have to wait until the lease is up in order to make the units no smoking? The answer to that question really will depend on your local laws and municipalities. Smokers are not a protected class, so you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, you need to, if you have a third-party management company, have them go find out what the rules in your town. And if not, then you're going to go need to check into that. Worst case scenario, as the leases come up for renewal, you can add that to the lease. If you have a smoker on there and you say no smoking, you're probably going to lose that person. Usually that's okay in most cases. That could be an opportunity to go in, clean the unit, renovate it a little bit, and increase the rents. But generally speaking, smokers are not a protected class, and you would do that as the leases come up for renewal. Now, you could post, I believe, on common areas and just say, okay, no more smoking, all that. But as far as inside the units, check your local laws. That's probably going to be lease specific. But good question. Let's say Hello Kia One on Instagram asks, would you prefer doing a HELOC or a cash out refinancing to buy an investment property? That would depend on what my long-term goals are for both the property I'm buying and for the one I'm doing the refinance on, and that would also depend on how quickly I'm going to be able to use the money, right? So if I'm going to, if I don't have a property yet, and it might be 6 or 12 months until I buy that new property, I might do a HELOC, which stands for home equity line of credit, because you pay interest on that money until you actually pull it and use it, right? So if you get a line of credit set up and then 6 months later, 9 months later, you find the property, and then you pull the line of credit and you put the money to work, and then you can also pay that money back real quick, if you get it out of the property and then you stop paying interest. The downside is typically the interest rate's a little bit higher. If you do a cash out refinance, you're probably going to have a lower interest rate, but now you are permanently paying interest on that money. So the answer to the question largely depends on your business plan and some timing aspects, and whether you just want to permanently have the money out and pay interest on it, or are you willing to pay a little bit more and have the ability to go, to zero and then back and forth. So kind of depends on the business model, but a very good question that comes up a lot. I like the HELOCs. I like always, one of the general principles of real estate investing and then just finance in general is get money when you don't need it, right? So get a HELOC before you even, if you can, get a HELOC, even if you don't know that you're going to need it. So then when a great deal comes up that you just don't want to pass up on, you have available. So good question. All right, man. Facebook is active today. Let's see. We've got, this is a good question on Instagram. Be in the UNC. What is that? Be in the new North Carolina, or who knows? But how do I purchase a rental first home with zero credit score? Hopefully, your credit score isn't actually zero. But regardless, as far as purchasing a single family house as your primary residence, that might be difficult because residential mortgages are actually some of the toughest to get. But the key could be to have somebody else sign on for it with you. You could also just get private money. So let's say you need $150,000 to buy a house. If you can find 3 people who will private individuals who will loan you $50,000 at, who knows, 7% interest, then you can do it that way too. That's just going to be relationship based and not credit score based. So if you got no or really bad credit, all that means is traditional banks are kind of out for you. That doesn't mean you can't do hard money, although that's probably a last resort, or private money or partnering. So that's what I would do if I had really bad credit. Let me see here. Let's get, and also remember, let us know where you're coming in from when you ask your question. Facebook, we got lots. So we'll ask Denisha Brown on Facebook, is wholesaling a good start when you have little capital to start with? What types of things need to be included in a wholesale contract? Well, I have not done single family stuff or significant amounts of single family stuff since 2011. However, the answer to the question is yes, wholesaling can be a great way to start if you don't have little capital, if you don't have a lot of capital, because you're getting a deal under contract and you're basically selling that contract to somebody else and marking it up, leaving enough meat on the bone for them to have a great deal, but then you get to make a profit as well. So if you're able to get great deals, but you don't have a lot of capital, yes, wholesaling can be a really good way. Hello, Craig's from Maui. Hey, you're right out there with Brandon. That can be a great way to get started. However, if your goal is to become a wholesaler or flipper, that's great. If your goal is to go into multifamily or single family rentals, then wholesaling is a way to build capital, but it's not required, right? You can partner, you can get private money. The deals that we do with apartments, we do stuff anywhere from $5 to $50 million. And I can tell you, I don't have the money for all of that. But over time, I've built up a network of people that do, and that's how we do those deals. And the same applies all the way down to buying a single family rental in Houston, Texas, right? So that's the principle I would apply. If you like wholesaling, you want to build a wholesaling business, go for it. Is that a requirement to get into other things just because you don't have capital? No, it's not. It's a good option, not a requirement. Good question. Hey, Columbia, and Donicia's in Columbia, South Carolina. A good, stable rental market, by the way. We've got a property in Augusta, not too far from there, and Columbia is one of the markets that we look at. The Carolinas as a whole are a great place to invest, and Columbia, with the government influence there, tends to be a good, stable market. All right, I'm going to go to Instagram with Shelbus since she's from I can't see, it looks like Southern California. So I'm going to answer that question. If I'm buying a multifamily property that I intend to live in, can I use the future income from the other units to help in qualifying for a mortgage? Well, let's see. If you're talking about qualifying for a mortgage, then I'm assuming you mean a 4-unit or smaller. Because once you get to 5 units and above, then you don't have to qualify for the mortgage. The property does. So that's a big distinction. That's one of the reasons we really like stuff 5 units and up, because then your personal financial situation doesn't actually matter as much. So let's just say you're looking at a 4-plex and you're saying, hey, can I use future income from the other units to help in qualifying for a mortgage? I have not been in the residential mortgage space for quite a few years. I would, from what I remember, in most cases, they want to see like a 12-month history of that rental income coming in order to qualify it. But you might, if you work hard enough, you might be able to find a lender who's willing to basically do it on pro forma, as long as you have a lot of data to back it up. Again, my direct experience is in the commercial stuff, 5 units and on up. Residential is a little bit different. David Green is probably the guy for the answer on that one when you're talking 4 units and under. But not knowing for certain, I would just go talk to every dang lender you can find, right? One of our multifamily deals back in 2014, I think it was incredibly hard to finance. We got told no over and over and over again. We had to go through 65 lenders until we finally found one that would do it. And it was because of a friend of a friend of a friend knew a guy on the board of the bank, and it was this little 1-branch bank, right? So really the question is keep asking until you eventually get the yes, right? It doesn't matter how many no's you get once you eventually get your yes. So, all right, let me see here. Jared Rock asked just a quick question. What do you think of the rental market on Facebook in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan? I don't really know. We focus on the Southeast United States, but what I will say is, even though the general demographic trend in the U.S. is for people to move down to the Southeast, so Florida, Georgia, Carolinas, Texas, Arizona, Utah, that's where people are moving. They're definitely fleeing New York. They're fleeing California. So you want to invest where people are moving. But with that said, every region, every state, even every large market has pockets that people are moving to, right? So even if you might say, well, this region is declining, there's probably going to be pockets in that region that are growing. So real estate is very, very local. So I don't know Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, other than there are going to be markets in there that are great. I would recommend going to, and I don't remember the URL, but look up the Harvard Center for Housing Studies, or it's either the Harvard Center for Joint Housing Studies, something along those lines. Just Google that. You'll find their website. They have an awesome map of the entire United States by county. And it shows each county if it's gaining population or losing population. So I would say find a county in your area that is gaining population, and that's the indication that you may have a good market. And Estilio Wenbean on Instagram commented that people moving to the New York suburbs, yeah, that is true as a whole. And then that actually illustrates exactly what we were talking about. And thank you for bringing that up. If you look at New York as a whole, wow, losing population, right? But if you zoom in, yeah, the city might be losing people, but a lot of those people aren't necessarily going to Florida. A lot of them are, but not all of them. A lot of them are going to the suburbs. And so some of those suburbs could end up being really good places to invest. Instagram Nugs123 says, how's the Nashville market? I don't invest there, but that's just because it's out of my area, but it's very strong. It's been a good market for the last few years. It's also very hot. Lots of people know it's a good market, and competition is pretty stiff there for deals. So good questions. All right, let me see here. We got a good string of questions on Instagram. And Jose Mac 14, since you did tell us where you're coming from, Dallas, Texas, I'm going to pick your question. Where did you find your first flip? Did you use a wholesaler agent? So our first flip was a cold call to a person who was in pre-foreclosure, meaning they were behind on their mortgage payments, and the bank had filed a notice saying that the bank was going to foreclose. I hadn't taken it yet, but they were going to. So that's a pre-foreclosure. This was in 2007 when their pre-foreclosures were starting to climb as we headed into the Great Recession. And so he was a cold call, and talked to him over a period of several months. And then before his auction, he eventually agreed to sell us the house. But what I didn't tell, what I left out, and you'll hear this if you go back to my very first Bigger Pockets interview, is it took me 6 months to find that guy. And when we did connect with him, he disappeared for 3 months, and then I finally got in touch with him like 2 days before his auction. And what happened that day is I went into work at 7:30 in the morning, and I hadn't been able to get him on the phone. I knew he was about to lose the house, and I was like, I'm going to try him one more time. 7:30 in the morning, I called. He actually answered the phone. And long story short, I literally just left work, didn't ask permission, went to his condo, signed up the deal, just a bunch of other hoops, got it closed. But that call that I made to him, that was phone call 4,576. It took me 4,500 calls to get that first deal. But that's what got me started. That's why I'm here today. And we've done a couple thousand apartment units. So I got it from a pre-foreclosure. Doesn't really matter where you get it. It's persistence. So that whether you're working with a wholesaler or an agent, the real key is to stay in the game. So, all right, good question. Oh, I think I want to scroll back here on Instagram. Let's see. I thought I saw a pretty good question. Let's see. Melvin 223 on Instagram says, "Do you think the real estate market in Arizona, Texas will have a negative effect?" Not sure what you mean by negative effect. So if you get a chance to clarify, jump in and do that. What I can see as a negative effect is in those markets, affordability is going down because prices are getting bid up. That applies to single family and apartments. One of the reasons that we're no longer investing in Texas isn't because we don't think it's a good market, is because the entire world knows it's a good market and it's crazy competitive. We have people just throwing down $1 million deposits hard day one, which means it's not refundable. Cap rates keep going down, people paying higher and higher prices. So that to me would be a negative effect, is affordability going down, prices going up. As far as the economy as a whole, I think Arizona and Texas are probably going to continue to do well because the key is population growth. Both those markets are doing well. People, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, people are leaving Texas. They're not leaving Texas. They're leaving California for Texas, leaving New York for Texas, Florida, all those places. So, there'll be some negative effects, but overall, I do think those would be good places to invest. So let me get a sip of coffee because it's still early afternoon here in California, and another question. All right. Let me know where you're coming in from, and make sure you hit the hearts and the likes so Bigger Pockets doesn't fire me. All right. Let's see. Estilio asks, "What's your Instagram handle?" If you look, it's Vantage Point Acquisitions. That's that's Instagram, Facebook, and then you'll also find our website. You can connect with us directly on there if you actually want to send me an email, get into a conversation. Let me see here. KN95 mask today. I love your handle, so I'm gonna answer your question, even though I don't have a good answer for it. Can you list the negatives and positives of virtual wholesaling? Well, I can say the positives are you can earn good chunks of money without putting a lot of capital of your own capital at risk. You're eliminating the risk of holding a property for too long. You're eliminating renovation risk. So those are a lot of the positives. The negatives, you're maybe not quite as much upside as if you flipped it yourself. And then that's really kind of the only thing that comes to mind. So again, I haven't done a lot of single family stuff in the last few years, but that's how I would answer that question. And hopefully someone's given us a lot of heart. So hopefully that was helpful. And Elizabeth is on Lake Wiley from Facebook. So cool. Actually, Elizabeth, where's Lake Wiley? I'm not sure where that is. All right. Oh, Cheyenne, Wyoming. I love Wyoming. Grand Tetons are one of my favorite mountain ranges to go ski. You guys are getting a ton of snow right now. I'm super jealous. Hoping to get up there maybe in March. Josh Boss asked, where can we listen to the interview? If you just go to the Bigger Pocket, it's on YouTube, if you search, and then just go to the Bigger Pockets, but wherever you subscribe to the podcast, it's episodes 170 and 279. Melvin, okay. I got two more questions I want to pick up here on Instagram. Sorry about the thumb in the screen here. Stilio asks, what top markets are you looking into? For quote unquote top market, I would be a little careful with that description, because often that means the ones that are in the headlines and the ones that are in Forbes lists and all that. Generally speaking, if a market is making a top 10 list, a lot of the gains have already been had. So some markets that, again, I really like North Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Outside of that, if I was going to expand, I would look into maybe San Antonio, Texas, lots of small markets in Utah, like St. George, Utah, Ogden. Salt Lake City is not that small. I think it's like 500,000 or more, but it's still a good market. Boise, Idaho, Columbus, Ohio is a pretty good market. So if I was going to expand, those are some of the markets that I would look into, in addition to the areas that we already cover. And again, I mentioned earlier, go to the Harvard Center for Joint Housing Studies, and I would start with that map and go to counties where you see population growth, and then see what markets are in there. And so I define a hot market not by what markets are in the headlines, but what markets have the highest population growth and the highest income growth. That is a hot market that you want to be in. But good question. And then next question on Instagram, Melvin asks, do you think we're in a real estate bubble? Are prices high? Yes. Are cap rates low? Yes. Is the market a bit frothy, especially in certain locations? Yes. Are we in a bubble? No. In my opinion, the reason I say that is at least twofold. Number one, if you go back to the Great Recession in 2007, 8, and 9, what caused that largely was debt flowing too freely, right? If you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan. They were just handing out money for free. Just no one cared. Just like greater fool theory, right? Well, we'll buy it, we'll get a loan, and we'll sell it higher, sell it for more to the next person. So when that whole thing locked up and collapsed, it took the real estate market with it, and that really was a bubble because it was based on fake debt and bad loans, and that's not something that will long-term sustain the market. This time around, we have a growing housing shortage. There is not enough housing for everybody in this country. By 2030, the National Apartment Association projects a 4.6 million unit shortage. So we have demand exceeding supply. That is a strong fundamental and not something, not fake, and not something that was just going to disappear or go away. So that argues against a bubble. Another reason I would say we're probably not in a bubble is real interest rates are very, very low. And so the debt that you can use to acquire real estate is very inexpensive and therefore supports higher pricing. Now, what's the difference between the debt now and the debt back in 2006, 7, 8, and 9 is underwriting today has actually been really responsible and strong. So we have, back in the last recession, debt was just handed out to anyone who wanted it. Now we have debt that is actually can be difficult to get and is very conservatively underwritten. But for those who can get it, the terms are very good. So that's a fundamental. So while I certainly am careful in certain markets and definitely am cognizant of not overpaying, I don't believe we're in a bubble. And a bubble would indicate that something's just going to change and the whole thing's going to collapse. The fundamentals argue against that. Could we see a decline in pricing at some point? Possibly, especially in certain markets. Candidly, a lot of us thought that was going to happen in 2020 once COVID started. It didn't. Pricing actually rose in a lot of markets for multifamily assets. So short answer, bubble, I don't think so. But good question. That comes up a lot. All right, Tony from Houston. Hello. Let me see here. Apparently my thumb's too fat to operate an Instagram feed. Let me see. All right, Perella. Hello from Minnesota. Oh, we got Alberta. Nice. All right, let's go back to a Facebook question. How about hello, Elizabeth from South Carolina. Oh, okay, that's where Lake Wiley is. Cool. All right, Ben Zeller on Facebook says Massachusetts is on the rise with all rental prices. I agree. I currently own a 3-family and rent the other 2 units. Nice. Would you raise the rent to be competitive with other rentals or keep it below to keep my good tenants? That's the age-old question, the landlord's dilemma. So again, it depends on a lot of factors. So if your goal is consistent occupancy, minimizing loss through vacancy, by minimizing vacancy, and you have tenants that pay on time, they take good care of the units, then yeah, it might be worth keeping the pricing a little bit lower so that they stay there. Because the upside is when someone moves out, you got to turn that unit, right? Often you got to replace the carpet, you got to repaint, you got to do some expense to that turnover. So, bumping rents, if you have to pay a couple $1,000s in turnover, it's going to take you a while to recoup that. On the other hand, you could consider what's called a nuisance increase. And that is, instead of going for like a $50 increase or a $100 increase, you increase the rent, $10 or $15, which most people aren't going to move over a $10 or $15 a month increase. Especially if you say, hey, I'm going to increase, your rent $20 a month, and I'm going to get you a new microwave, right? Or I'm going to clean the carpets, or do something that's relatively minor, but that is a nice gesture to those tenants. And that's one way to approach it. Now, on the flip side, I don't know how far behind rents your tenants are. Let's say if rents are $1,000, they should be $1,000, and your tenants are at $650. That might be time to have a conversation. Say, look, I need to bring your rents to $1,000. If you need to move, I understand, but here's the market. And hey, and I'm also willing to do these upgrades. Now, if the key is how well have you researched your market rent? Because if the market rent really is $1,000 and they're at $650 or whatever, and they go, oh, I'm going to move, and they go look around and everything else is $1,000 or more, guess what's going to happen? They're going to stay, because why move if everything else is the same price or more? So that's how I would approach it. I would kind of ask, and depending on also how much time do you want to spend on that property, right? If you keep rent low and keep residents in place and they don't move, then that means you can spend more time looking for another deal or go on a vacation or your W-2 job or whatever your situation is. So that's another factor is, just saying, you know what, I want to spend time finding a new deal rather than dealing with vacancy and trying to maximize rent on this existing one. So lots to consider on there. Let's see, back on Facebook, Denisha Brown, where do we get contracts written when doing deals on our own without real estate agents? Columbia, South Carolina. You bring up a really good strategic point, Denisha, and that is, so for apartments that, like, when we write an offer, we write up what's our own, what's called LOI. That stands for letter of intent. And it's exactly what it sounds. It's got our logo on it, my signature on the bottom. And it just kind of outlines the basic terms, right? It's not legally binding. Usually you can say it is, but ours isn't. Where we say, hey, we're going to buy this property for this price. And we're going to get a loan for 75%. And we're going to do inspections for 30 days, and then we're going to close 30 days later. And by the way, here's some references, lenders, brokers, etc. And here's some other properties we own. Whatever you can put in that letter of intent to kind of sell yourself to the seller. That's how we make offers. Now, if you're talking about single families, duplexes, fourplexes that are like on the residential MLS or maybe listed with a residential broker, I definitely would go straight to that listing agent and just say, you can ask them, say, hey, would you like me to just give you a letter of intent, or would you like me to tell you the terms and then you can write up an offer and represent both of us? So that's how I would approach it. There are some good buyers agents out there who can hunt down deals for you. And if you find one of those and they find a deal for you, by all means, don't circumvent them. Have them write up the offer. But if you find a deal on yourself of any size, my opinion is to write the offer yourself and work directly with whoever has that deal, whether it's the seller themselves or an agent or a broker or something like that. All right, let's see what else we got here. All right, Spastry, hello from LA, right back at you. And then Scott the Rock 5 on the other side in New York City. Oh, Dimitri from Greece. Awesome. My wife had a trip scheduled for there last year, and unfortunately, COVID canceled that. All right, let's see here. Atlanta, Georgia. That's been a great rental market to invest in, still is, and I think it will continue to be going forward. All right, we got New Jersey. Lots of hellos. Thanks for letting us know where you're in or where you're coming in from. And sorry about that. My didn't get much sleep last night. And all right, let's keep going with questions. Remember, put your questions in, and we'll answer as many as we can. Let's see. Perel fella asked on Instagram, how has building your brand with BP helped out your investing? It definitely has helped out. I don't have any numbers to quantify or specifically, give to you. I can say that success in real estate investing, a huge part of it is just who you know, being known and interacting with other people. Yes, analysis is important. Yes, deal finding is important. But at the end of the day, behind every deal is another person. And so the more people you know, the more people you connect with, the better off your investing business is going to be. And then also, it's helped because, in answering, I get to just interact with people. I get to see where other people are in the market, what they're seeing in the market. So I get market intelligence. And then it lets me, by answering questions on the fly, one benefit to me is, hopefully I'm benefiting all of you by sharing some knowledge and experience so that you don't have to go out and experience it yourself. But the flip side is it helps me to realize, do I have a gap in my knowledge, right? Is there something I'm missing? So, maybe if maybe you're not going to be doing a BP live like this, but you can get in the forums and basically do the same thing, right? You can answer questions, you can post questions, have discussions, try to find BP meetups in your local area and do that and have all those benefits. And then I'd say the final benefit is, sometimes real estate investing and real estate entrepreneurship can be a bit of a lonely endeavor. So the more people that you connect with who are doing the same thing, it'll be less lonely, more enjoyable, and probably more successful. So, all right, good question. Yes, Hayes Holland on Facebook, he added a comment, says the more hands you shake, the more money you make. Generally, that is true. Although I think these days it's a fist bump or an elbow tag. I don't know if we do handshakes anymore, but the principle certainly applies. All right, Joe Kemick on Facebook asks, "Hey Andrew, would a mother-in-law unit on one of my units at duplex raise property value substantially?" That depends on your market. The short answer is probably, but because I know in the Bay Area of San Francisco, that's actually, I believe, one of David Green's strategies is to look for properties where you can convert a basement into a mother-in-law unit, or even add an ADU, which stands for additional dwelling unit or mother-in-law unit, on the back of the property. So it definitely depends on your market. I think that worked better in higher priced markets, but it certainly can be successful. So, all right, Al Nicholas on Facebook, newbie here. Hello from Orlando. What you think about the Orlando market? I think prices are a little too inflated here. Florida in general is a growth market. It's doing really well. Orlando was participating in that growth quite well up until COVID. Candidly, it's hard to analyze the Orlando market with travel being down and tourism being down and in all the restrictions. So, Orlando has probably been hit harder than many other markets because it's so reliant on tourism. But long term, once we're post-COVID, whenever that is and whatever that looks like, I think Orlando probably will continue to do well. I would just be would be more careful in the short term, not knowing, how COVID's going to play out. And because there definitely is a little bit higher level of property distress in Orlando because of the dependence on tourism, as opposed to most other Florida markets. So the properties that we have in other Florida markets, we don't have anything in Orlando, but the other place we are in Florida is doing fantastic. Again, Orlando, parts of it, I think, my understanding, are struggling a little bit more. But on the flip side of that is that could be opportunity. If you could pick up a distressed asset, get it turned around a few years from now, that could end up being a really good play. So, all right, Bubblegum Dreams on Instagram asks, what is the situation with renters not being able to afford to pay rent due to COVID? How long does this last? That is the question all of us landlords have been asking for quite some time now. So the overall situation is luxury class apartments and rentals, A+ type stuff, are struggling because people are generally moving away from expensive rentals and from cities where most of those are located. And then also low end stuff, C-class, true C-class properties in C neighborhoods, those are having trouble because those are your hospitality workers, restaurant workers, service industry workers. Those are the people that are unfortunately bearing the brunt of the job losses and losses of income. So those are the areas where you're seeing the most effects. How long does that last? It really depends on how quickly we get vaccines rolled out, and how quickly the general population gets comfortable just being out and going back to regular life, and how quickly the economy gets back to being 100% open. So, most forecasts that I see, and I would agree with this, I think the next 3 to 6 months could be pretty challenging. And then hopefully by the end of 2021, we'll be returning to normal. And then I've seen a lot of forecasts for rent growth of 3 to 4% in 2022 and 23. So short answer is, the next 3 to 6 months could be really difficult with people not being able to pay rent. We still have these moratoriums in place. My guess is that's going to get extended again once we get to the end of March. People do have to, apply and go through a process to prove that they're COVID affected. But once they do, they can't be evicted. And candidly, you don't want to evict someone who's truly in hardship because of COVID. But the flip side is there are people who are just taking advantage of the situation. So I think this is going to take at least 6 more months to play out, possibly a year or longer in some other pockets. And just whenever you're looking at deals, just factor that in. In fact, the most recent deal that we underwrote, we factored in a decline in income the first year, even though we don't think that's actually going to happen. We factored that in just as a contingency in case the effects of COVID last a little bit longer. So good question. All right, let's see. We'll keep rolling here on Instagram. Cisco, hello from Denver, Colorado. Talk with AJ, Oklahoma. Good to see you. All right. Emob Society from Las Vegas on Instagram. Hello. New to real estate investing. Actually put REI, which I'm assuming you don't mean the store REI, which is one of my favorites. I'm assuming you mean real estate investing. And wondering if you had any insight for the market here in Las Vegas. There's I don't know Las Vegas very well. I don't invest there. I used to do flipping there back in 2009, but it's been about a decade since I've done anything in Las Vegas. I will say Las Vegas has definitely been hit very hard by COVID, with the casinos, shut down, and then very limited capacity, people not traveling. So short term, I think Las Vegas has some challenges. Long term, people are fleeing California, and one of the places they're going to is Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, despite being in the desert, is somewhat landlocked, right? You got mountains on east and west. And then on the south side, you've also got mountains where Highway 15 comes down and over through the pass down into Las Vegas. So Las Vegas actually does not have the sprawl that some other markets have. So long term, I think Las Vegas could be a good market coming out of the pandemic. It does tend to be a little bit more boom and bust than some other markets, so be aware of that. But if you can get yourself a really good deal and a good rental that makes sense today, meaning it cash flows, you've got a good safety margin, you've got good equity. If you buy that today and hold on to it for 5 or 10 years, I would assume you're probably going to do pretty well in Las Vegas. Again, because the number one factor with rentals and apartments is population growth and job growth. And population is definitely going to Las Vegas, and typically jobs follow population. So that would be my assessment of Las Vegas. Again, I'm not in that market, so a bit of a disclaimer, but that would how I would look at. Hello, Kia One posted on Instagram. Thank you for following up on that, Kia. It's the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies is where that map is that I was talking about, where you can look at every county across the country and analyze the population growth. So thank you for reposting that for us. All right, let's keep on going. All right. Let's see. We got lots of comments here. Hello from all over the places. Padam2658 says, "Can you raise rent before a contract expires?" I'm assuming you on Instagram. I'm assuming you mean before the lease expires. Typically, the answer to that is no. So if you've got 6 months left on the lease, you can't usually raise the rent until that 6 months is up. Of course, if you're inheriting a month-to-month lease, then by all means, you can once you can change it to either you can increase the rent at the end of the month or change it to a longer-term lease. I will say be careful. Some markets, like California and New York, do have some rent control laws that address number one, how much you can raise rent, and then number two, the timing of it. So like in California, I believe you have to give, depending on the size of the rent increase, you have to give residents a certain amount of notice in advance that the rent's going up. So make sure you know your landlord laws, especially if you're in like a state like California, Washington, or New York, which tends to be very resident friendly. All right. Rocco asks, "Are you Obama?" Definitely not. All right. Hello, Joshua from Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Man, you guys are getting a heck of a winter this year. Let me see. All right. Baha Vaden, what do you think about the Houston, Texas market? So we actually used to live in the Houston area, and we had a 100-unit apartment complex there for 5 years. It did very, very well. Houston long-term, I would say, is a good market. You definitely have population growth. You've got the Port of Houston there, which does help diversify the economy. You have a somewhat of energy dependent economy, although they are diversifying. So I'd be aware of that. But long term, again, I think Houston's gonna be good. Now, one interesting thing about Houston is Houston doesn't have zoning, right? So it's like a chessboard of good areas and maybe not so good areas. So you got to be careful, even more careful than normal about picking your neighborhoods in Houston because of that lack of zoning. And then also lots of the suburbs outside of Houston and secondary cities on the, within an hour are really good. So if you go up like to Tomball, Magnolia, Conroe, Sugarland, Katy, all those places are really good suburbs of Houston to invest in. So yeah, overall, I do like Houston. All right, let's jump over to Hayes on Facebook. It says, do you normally try to negotiate property management fees? The rate I'm getting quoted is 10%. Is that high? Did you self-manage when you first started? Charlotte, North Carolina. 10% does sound on the high end of normal to me. In fact, it sounds like you must be talking about a single family or small multifamily below 10 units, in which case 8 to 10% is kind of the norm. When you get up to larger apartments, 3 and 4% is more normal. So if you're talking about, Hayes, if you're looking at like a duplex or something like that, and they're quoting me 10%, I might say, well, how about I give you 8% and then set them up on, okay, thanks, Hayes, for qualifying. You're talking about single family. So here's what I would do. If they're quoting me 10%, I might come back and say, all right, everyone deserves to earn a profit and earn a living. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you, and I'll pick a number, 7%, 8%, whatever. If the property performs at this level, right, and Hayes, pick a level that you want the property to perform at and you think it can and should. If it exceeds this, then we'll give you a bonus of an extra 1 or 2%, right? So basically, you pay them for performance. You're making them a partner in the deal. You're aligning their interest with yours, right? Because they're going to succeed when you're going to succeed. And we use a similar principle on our large apartment complexes with our property managers. And I mean, when I say, I don't mean the management company, I mean the actual manager who's on site, but the principle applies. What we do is we say, okay, here's your salary, here's your benefits and all that kind of stuff. Obviously they're expected to operate the property to the budget, but if they exceed the budget, meaning collects, net operating income is better than we planned on and better than pro forma, then that means they're making more money for us than we planned, which means everybody benefits. So we share that with them. So we have performance-based bonuses for our property managers. And I would do the same thing with your property management company on your single family. Say, okay, 10%, yeah, that's not bad. So let's do this. Let's start at 8, and we'll agree on a target where if you hit that target, I'll be happy to pay you 10% because that means we're all doing really well. That's how I would approach that negotiation. And then if you keep adding properties, for one unit, 8 to 10%. But let's say you get up to 5 or 10 or 15, you should start getting volume discounts, right? You shouldn't have to pay them 10% if you're giving them 15 units, especially if they're all in the same market like in Charlotte. So let me see here. AJ Who on Facebook, in regard to syndications, what is considered soliciting? This is an excerpt from what I read. Quote, in a Rule 506B offering, you can advertise only the brand. In a Rule 506C offering, you can advertise the deal. Working on starting our first syndication. Well, first of all, congrats on jumping into syndication. Syndication is a big fancy word for just pooling other people's money. And it can be a great way to scale your business and meet a lot of people. The rule, I'm not sure where this excerpt is coming from because it looks slightly off. 506B, the SEC says no soliciting at all, and it defines soliciting very, very broadly. So you cannot go on Facebook and say, whatever your brand is. So let's say, you got a picture of mountains there. So I don't know. Let's say your Peak Investments, right? That's your brand. you can't go on Facebook and as Peak Investments and say, oh, hey, we're touring this great property today, and hoping to get it under contract. The SEC is going to say you are soliciting for investors. You definitely cannot mention returns on a podcast or on Facebook or anything like that. What you can do is you can talk about what you are doing in your investments and your business plans in an educational framework, in an educational setting, right? So you can tell people, well, yeah, this is hey, this is how we underwrite deals. I'm happy to share that with you, and these are the kind of markets we're excited about investing in. What kind of markets are you in? And that's for 506B. 506B means you can take accredited investors who are basically millionaires, but you can also take sophisticated investors who are people who aren't necessarily millionaires, but they're sophisticated enough to be able to evaluate your investment and say, hey, this is good for me or this isn't, right? So 506C, if you do 506C, the downside is, number one, you get some more paperwork and you have a burden of proof, meaning you have to prove everybody is accredited. The downside is you can't take any sophisticated people, but the upside is you can solicit. You can say whatever you want. You can get on Facebook and talk about past deals. You can talk about the current deal. You can full on solicit in basically any ethical form or fashion, as long as you only accept accredited investors, and then they have to prove that they're accredited. And don't worry about that. There's some websites out there where for $50 per person, they can go in, they upload tax returns or a CPA letter or something like that. They prove they're accredited, and boom, they're on your list. So that's SEC considers a pretty broad definition of what solicitation is. And kind of the rule of thumb is, if you think it even might be soliciting, like if you're questioning, like, can I say this? Odds are it probably is, or at least in the eyes of the SEC. You and I might not consider it soliciting, but they will. So good question. And that's a really important question to ask. So, all right, well, we just got a few more minutes here. So if you're holding on to any questions, go ahead and get them typed in, and we will hit as many as we can. All right, let's see. I think we're going to try to catch up here on Instagram. Rodrigo asked, what about Mobile, Alabama? Is it a hot market or not much? We don't invest in Mobile, largely just because we kind of drew the line at the west end of the Florida Panhandle. Mobile overall seems to be losing people. I don't really consider it a strong market. See, it does seem to be struggling a little bit. So not on my list of places that I would look for. So yeah, again, I don't go deep into Mobile, but I don't believe it's quite a really strong market. All right, let me see here. No basements in the Bay Area. Okay, let's see. All right, we got that question. Jaka, where in Florida have you invested? We are in the Florida Panhandle. We do look a little bit in Orlando and Tampa northward. Jacksonville is a good, strong market. Panama City Beach West, all the way up to the Alabama border. That whole section are great markets. And there's also lots of little good markets in between here. All right, let me see. The Healy House on Instagram asks, tips for investing in multifamily out of state. Well, that's exactly what we do. I mean, I'm in California. The closest property to me is in Florida. Number one, if you haven't done it, get David Green's book, Long Distance Real Estate Investing. It's focused on single family, but the principles apply just the same to multifamily. So one of the real keys to investing in multifamily out of state is building the right team wherever you're going to be. So that's, property manager is probably the most important. You're going to build a network of agents or brokers. You're eventually going to build a network of contractors. You're going to find an attorney that's, licensed in that state. Really the biggest thing is building a team that can manage properties for you in that market. It can be boots on the ground, can do due diligence, and be your eyes and ears on the property. So that's really the biggest thing. And then I like to pick a market that is at least easy to get to. So most of our stuff is within 6 hours of Atlanta. And from California, there's probably, there used to be 10 flights direct a day from LA to Atlanta. I don't know how many there are now, but it's easy to get to. I can be there in 4.5 hours, right? So that's another thing to factor in. and just pick a market that has growing population and jobs, and then go build that team there. So that's definitely how to do that. Let me see. We'll see what else we can get in here before we close in 3 minutes. All right, Mr. Seacast, hello from Charleston, South Carolina. On Instagram, just closed on my second investment property yesterday. Congratulations, well done. Thanks to people like you for sharing your knowledge and experience. Oh, awesome. Well, I really appreciate that. I didn't realize that was a compliment, not a question. So I'm extra glad that I read that. And again, congratulations on your second deal. Charleston is another very strong market. We've tried to get some stuff there, but we've gotten beat out each time. Let me see. All right, let's try to pick one more question. Which one is going to be? Well, while I'm scrolling, I can ask. Denisha asked on Facebook, "What's the difference between an agent and a broker?" It's really in the commercial world for apartments. We tend to call the agents brokers because they're brokering deals. It's a lot more proactive on their part. In single family, an agent gets a listing. They generally just put it on the MLS and just wait for offers to come in. Whereas in the apartment world, we tend to, even though technically they are agents, we usually call them brokers because, again, it's much more active. They're like, okay, I got this deal, and I got, who are the 5 people that I'm going to call directly about this? And they reach out, or they send it just to their investor list. And so they're literally brokering deals. So, functionally, they're kind of one and the same, but we tend to just call commercial ones brokers because it's a little bit more proactive. So, all right. Okay, we got all kinds of random stuff here on Instagram. So let's see if we can pick up another question. All right. So whoever, oh, you know what? CJ Noble on Instagram, I'm going to answer your question here. So he asked, to build single family or small multifamily portfolio, and why? I prefer small multi because a handful of reasons. One, easier to manage, right? All of your units are in one spot. Instead of having 4 single family houses spread around town, you've got 4 on one parcel, which means your maintenance person or you, whoever's doing the stuff, only has to go to one spot. You don't have to drive around town. Instead of 4 roofs, you've got 1 roof. So overall, your repairs and expenses are lower, and the time invested tends to be lower, and they're just much easier to manage. So given the chance between X number of single family units and X number of multifamily, I would always go to multifamily. It's just faster. It's easier to manage. Expenses go down. You get economies of scale. And then also one other thing, single family houses are valued based on comparable sales, which is something you don't have any control over. A multifamily property that's 5 units and up, it's valued on the net operating income, which is something you can control. You can do improvements to raise rents. You can make improvements to lower expenses. So even if the market stays flat, if you increase that net operating income, you just increase the value of your property. So that's another reason I would prefer to have a 10-unit multifamily instead of 10 single-family houses scattered all around. So, all right. That brings us to the end of our hour already. I appreciate all the questions. Thank you for spending time with us on your Friday afternoon. Hopefully this was valuable to you. We'll keep doing these throughout the year. If you'd like to have further conversation, just Vantage Point Acquisitions on all the social platforms. Of course, you can connect with me on Bigger Pockets. VPACQ.com is the website. There's a couple of ways on there to connect. In the meantime, go out and look at deals, start meeting people, start networking. If you already have properties, go get some more. Debt is inexpensive right now. And when you get it long-term and fixed debt, that can make for a great investment. We're probably looking at a period of inflation coming up, which means you're going to want to own hard assets like real estate. So whether you're just getting started or you're already in the game, either get started or it's time to scale and take advantage of what's coming. So again, enjoy talking with everybody. Look forward to talking to you again here in another couple of weeks. Have a great weekend and talk to you soon. Take care.